All right. I think we are live. I like to just double check before I jump right in on LinkedIn and YouTube. It says pre-live. Give it a second to catch up. All right. We should be good to go. Hi, everybody. I am Kristi Mitchell. I am your host for Unfudge Your Marketing. I am a marketing consultant strategist. I work with business owners, typically in the professional services space, who have relied on referrals and word of mouth to build their business. And they've really just realized they're ready to grow and ensure the future success of their business. And they know they need a strategic marketing plan in order to do that. So, similar to how a trainer at the gym helps you figure out the exercises, the machines that you use, the schedule you need to help you get those health results, that's what I do for my clients from a marketing standpoint for their business. Here on Unfudge Your Marketing, this is a live series where I chat with business owners about their marketing mishaps, mistakes, most importantly, really those lessons learned from those experiences to benefit all of you who are watching and listening to our conversation. So, my guest today, I'm really excited to welcome on Melissa Henry. She's the founder of Personal Brandography. She helps coaches and consultants who feel like their brand is a mishmash and not attracting their perfect clients. She helps them create an irresistible, authentic brand, one that allows them to make a big impact and make more money in their business. With over 14 years as an entrepreneur and brand builder, Melissa's approach is combining brand foundation clarity, visual brand strategy, custom photography to help her clients gain clear direction and optimize their brand so they can grow and scale faster. So excited to welcome you on today, Melissa.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I am really excited about this. It's the first conversation I'm having on the show with someone who is also in the marketing space. So I think that you have a really great perspective to share, both as a business owner who has tried some marketing things that didn't pan out the way you hoped, and you have that marketing background as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's a great thing to point out actually, because many times we're in our own space and we think we can do it ourselves, but it's a little bit like trying to do brain surgery on yourself. You can't necessarily see what's going on out there. So, agreed 100%. I think that it's perfect for this conversation.
Yeah, what's interesting too is, and I didn't really think about this until just now as we're starting to kick off this conversation, is some of my past guests have mentioned sort of the challenge that they had in making decisions about moving forward with their marketing because they don't have a marketing background. And
Mhm.
so that makes it really challenging, right? To know kind of what provider you need and what questions to ask and how do you pick that thing that's going to help move you forward. And so even with, you being in the marketing space, it sounds like you recognize, like, yes, I have experience in this space, and I still need experts to help guide me on my own journey.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're so it's that word expert is interesting because, you know, expert means like getting very clear about a specific thing and getting very deep into that specific thing, not having the shallow level of knowledge of a lot of things. And so I'm squarely in the space of brand. So it's about the strategy, right? Really, really heavy into the strategy stuff. So I'm not necessarily someone that goes and seeks out like how do I do all the different marketing things, right? I mean, I know over the course of time what I've learned and things like that. But, if you asked me, "Hey Melissa, sit down with me and do a marketing strategy," I would say I'll get you up to this point in terms of the brand, but then I need someone like you to help figure out what's the actual moving forward, like what are the actual tactics and how are we
Yeah.
going to make that work?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And we could have a whole nother episode, I think, where we just talk about marketing and how huge it is and all of the moving
Yes,
pieces in it.
I
But
know.
for the purposes of today's conversation, what we really want to focus on is an experience that you shared with me when we were kind of prepping for this conversation. One that you talked about where you had ended up purchasing publicity for your business, and it was in the early stages. This is a long time ago
Mhm.
for you because you've been in business a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to just kind of kick us off and give us a little context for what kind of led you to that point before you made that decision to purchase this publicity for your business.
Hmm. What led me to that point? Well, I think this pertains for a lot of people who are in business who have and specifically people who have a big vision. So I think there is a difference between someone who is going out in business to maybe be like a freelancer, you know what I mean, and just have gig kind of opportunities come their way versus someone who goes into business because they have this bigger impact in mind and they just see themselves in this different way, like ultimate way for them. So that's how I felt. I felt like I really had this big vision that I wanted to achieve. And so I think that made me a little bit what's the word? Like a little more anxious to make it happen faster, right?
Mm,
Than maybe I was actually prepared for. So this happened, I believe it was probably in my and as I think back, I do believe it was probably my first year of business. And I had joined this Facebook group that was about personal branding because that was a space that I was in. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I can connect with people, et cetera. And the leader of that group had a partner that was well, he was on the Forbes Council and he was like, "Hey, I probably shouldn't have said that by the way, but anyway, he's he was in that space and he was like, "Well, I can help you guys get on 10 um 10 publications like written, articles about you, featured. The word was featured in 10
mm,
publications, several of which are very high level ones. And that's going to blow up your business." That was literally, like, the way that it was presented to us.
mhm.
And, hey, it's only $5,000. And so that was a lot of money to me at that time, you know? Um, not that it's not a lot of money in general, but it was like, at the time, that was a stretch,
Yeah,
right?
especially first starting out, yeah.
Yeah, and I was, I'm one of those people where I'm gonna bet on myself, right? So very much a risk taker, I think because I have the vision, right? So I was like, you know what? This is worth it if I can get and reach that audience that will help me get to that next level that I can impact more people. So I jumped in with both feet and how far do you want me to go on this? Or
Yeah.
just like, let me just start telling the story? Because
Yeah, you're good.
okay.
Yeah, I would love to hear kind of how it all played out. What happened?
Yeah, so this big promise, 10 publications, 10 weeks, 3 of them very high level ones that we all know in business, right? So we dove into this project and I was providing, my viewpoint on branding and I was, writing some things, et cetera. We started going. And what I started to see sort of play out was um, the 10 weeks was getting longer and longer. And there
Mm,
was delays and more delays, right? And the kinds of I was not very savvy, I think, back then in terms of what agreements I was entering into. So I didn't really think about what does their version of featured mean and my
mm,
version of featured, right? I also didn't know that that's kind of like a not a good thing to do for like to pay to get into those things. I didn't know the whole industry. I didn't know that. It
mhm,
wasn't until I met someone who's actually a good friend, strategic partner of mine who's in PR and she's like, that's really not a good idea. Like you don't pay to get into publications, you may pay for PR support, right?
mhm.
But it's really you have to pitch to get in. It's not pay to play kind of situation in that way.
Right.
Not exactly in that way. And that's what was going on. So I
Mhm.
didn't even know I was doing something that was not kosher.
Yeah.
So this started going on and some of the publications that I was in, I mean, he did get me in some publications. Nobody was going to see this stuff. Nobody.
Mm,
That was kind of red flag number 1. I was like, "What is the I've never heard of this publication. What is this thing? And who's even reading this?"
yeah.
So, that's kind of like what happened is like it just
Mhm.
it went on for I think when all was said and done, it was something like 24, 26 weeks.
Oh,
So,
wow. More
like
than double.
yes, more than double, of constant like, not constant, but pretty much continuous checking in, what's going on, "Oh, there's this excuse, there's that, there's this." So the delivery of the service was, you know,
Yeah.
um, and I really wasn't involved in much of the strategy of it. Like, there was
Mhm.
no hey, what are the right publications for you, for your audience,
Mm,
for where they're hanging out? Big
yeah.
one. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yes.
then ultimately, this was the thing, this was the kicker, and this was what made me the most, like, frustrated at the end. Um, Actually, there's 2 things I'll add here. So number 1, I did get into those 3 magazines that he was talking about. I won't say what they are, but I did. I got into these 3 top magazines. And you know how? It was a little quote in the middle, buried in the article of someone else's article.
So
This
that's what
is not
I was going to
publicity.
ask you. So that was his definition of featured,
Uh-huh.
was you were like one tiny piece of this big article.
Yeah, yeah. It was my
Okay.
quote. I said it, but it was buried in there. Like nobody's going to find this. If they do, they're not even gonna remember it. Nobody remembers that stuff.
Yeah.
So if I look back on that, well, we'll get into that. But like I think here I'm looking at the situation where I wouldn't say it was a waste of money because I think we all learn from everything. It gave me an amazing story to talk about, right? It really, like, clued me in too on, "Oh my god, like, I'm in the branding space. I know this. I
Mhm.
know that it is important to be speaking to the audience where they're at, not just rando publications that don't matter."
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a couple things I want to dig in. So I did want to ask about that, like, because you're like, I thought I was going to be featured. I wasn't featured. Okay. So you,
Mhm.
in your mind, right, you're probably thinking like, this is going to be a whole piece written about me and my business and my
Yeah,
expertise.
yeah.
And then it turns out you get one tiny like quote attributed to you in the
Mhm,
grand scheme of the article.
mhm,
So definitely makes sense. And I could see, I feel like that would be a normal assumption for somebody going in entering into an agreement like that. Like a
mhm.
feature, you would think you are the feature,
Right.
um, not just a tiny piece of it. Another thing that I wanted to pick out from what you said, Melissa, is that he didn't ask questions, because this just came up on another interview where the piece of advice that my guest gave was, the person that you're entering into the agreement with from like a marketing provider should be curious. They should be asking you questions.
Mhm,
Because the example she had given was, I think if I remember correctly, she was saying like, I gave feedback on like why I didn't feel like the content was aligned. And rather than the marketing provider getting curious and trying to understand more,
mhm,
they just kind of dismissed it.
mm,
And so she was explaining like red flags are like they're dismissive, or they just kind of like brush it under the rug, or they're like, oh yeah, I got this, and they like move on, but they don't actually get it. And so being
mhm.
curious was a big thing that she said, and it sounds like that holds true for your experience as well, as there were just no questions asked.
No, I mean, there was like a form filled out, right? You know, just basic stuff and like, asking for us to like provide certain um, like our thoughts or, our thought leadership or whatever, but quite literally there was no guidance. There was no path. There was no let's align you with the right publications for you. These ones, these high level ones, my audience wasn't hanging out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, it literally was 26 weeks of wasted time is essentially what that was. And
Yeah.
I could have been this is one thing I think is so important for people to understand, and I know you probably come across this as much as I do in my space, and that is that when we go off in these tangents and we just select stuff that sounds really like, oh my god, this is so great, I'm going to be in these big magazines and it's going to just skyrocket my business and all these things, we're promised these pie in the sky things that it's like a dopamine hit, we're like, oh cool, yeah, 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 I want that,
Right.
but we don't have a strategy to make it work
Mm-hmm.
because number 1, it starts with the brand is what I learned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And number 2, it has to be the right strategy for you.
Right.
So, it frustrates me to no end when I see people I watch it all the time. Like, haven't you been in some of those, webinars where they're a little bit like high pressure sales kind of?
Mm,
Do you know? And it's
yes.
like, you gotta make a decision today because 'cause you're gonna miss out on all the bonuses back here. And
Yep.
it's just like, that's cool, except for I see these people kind of following their it's like they're somebody gave this analogy to me, and it's so good. They're finding a place to plug in. I wanna plug into that person because I think they're
Mhm.
gonna help me get where I wanna go. That's
Mhm.
not what gets you where you're going. All this stuff that you and I both do is so custom.
Yes.
It's so
Yep.
custom, and you have to be aligned with it.
Yeah. Another thing too related to that, and I wanted to go back to, was you had said at the beginning, like you were at a place where you were like anxious to like get it going. Like you like
Yeah,
wanted those quick wins, you wanted that success like pretty quickly. And it sounds like, that you were sold like, okay, this will be 10 weeks. And you're like, yeah, okay, let's do it, like 10 weeks. And part of the challenge with that, not only is it disappointing to you as the purchaser of those services that this has now gone twice as long as what I was told it's going to be, but it takes up your mental energy too,
yes,
right?
yes,
Like for that long of a time where you're like, trying to hound him and trying to get more answers and trying to make sure these like that takes
yeah,
up your time and energy that could have been spent on other areas, to your point, for more customized approaches to marketing that maybe
mhm,
are that longer haul, right?
mhm,
It's not going to be like a quick win overnight success, but you could have been spending your time and energy and budget on those sorts of activities rather than
right.
this other thing that's just kind of like lingering out there and not getting you what you hoped
Yeah,
for.
and no ROI,
Yeah.
right? Like, there's no that whole experience, none of those things actually did anything for me, and I'm not saying that PR, will always do that for you because there's a measure of what you need to do on the back end to make sure that it works for you. But the point being is there was no support there either. There was no like, hey, this is how you can use this PR. This is you should be out here doing this or,
Mhm.
giving guidance like on how this will work, how this will actually get you where you want to go. So, there's a whole lot there under the surface like you're saying, but
Yep.
I yeah, I 100% agree that it's a waste of headspace and
Yep.
uh, and to go for, listen, that was a half a year. It was a half a year
Right.
for nothing.
Yeah.
No results, 0.
Yes. Yeah.
Right,
So
bragging rights,
let's
that's it.
Yeah, right, right.
Right.
So let's go back to that point in time. Like you finished up the 24 weeks, you were disappointed, you realized it wasn't what you thought you signed up for.
Yeah.
What did you do at that point?
So, cried in my soup for a little bit. No, I mean, it's fine. I was like, "Okay, well, that was a waste." But again, I did recognize it was a learning experience. It actually was here's what was so great about it. It underscored for me the importance of developing my brand first because I mean the very obvious thing that I said earlier, the fact that the people I wanted to reach weren't reading these magazines necessarily. They might be,
Right.
but this is not where they were hanging out. Let's just
Yeah.
say that, not in droves, right?
Mhm.
And so I had to sit with that for a minute and say, did you just let your excitement about the possibilities for you outweigh the very real um, lack of understanding of who we were trying to meet? And I did.
Mhm.
And it really kind of made me get even more excited and focused on what a brand is. And for anybody listening, I mean, it is not your website. Just FYI. Um, Clearly, like, I had to sit with, "Okay, so now I need to do my deep dive. I need to go get really real about who I'm trying to reach, about exactly what kind of problem I wanna solve, you know, what are my values too?" I mean, that's another part of brand that goes into this marketing strategy stuff because if you don't know what you stand for or don't stand for, then you're not in alignment with these strategies that you just see that people try to sell you in a webinar.
Mhm.
And I wish I could tell you that was the only time I made that mistake. It's not. It's not.
I so appreciate you being open and honest with us here because I think it's really important for business owners to hear that, right?
Yeah.
That we all make mistakes. It happens. Sometimes we make multiple mistakes in the same
Yes.
way. Like you've also been in business a really long time.
Mhm.
So I feel like it's hopefully you don't feel bad about that, that, you've
No.
made other mistakes in a similar way. But if you want to
No, I
expand
mean,
on that.
there's always that measure of, gosh, what if I had done something different? But you can't it does me no good to beat myself up about it. It's more about
Right.
like, okay, so every mistake I make gets me that much more clear.
Uh huh.
That much more clear. I even had a aha moment over the weekend that we were talking about a little earlier today. So or when we got on first, but
Yes.
that was yet another like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna be" now when I start looking at my messaging, it's gonna be a little bit different because I got this really, like, in-depth understanding even further about who my client really is.
Yes.
So it's
It's
just
always
it's important,
evolving, right?
isn't it? It's always evolving, and
Yes.
that's what's I wanna point that out too, that in the brand space anyway, yes, you get the foundational pieces, but then you also kind of need to evolve with your brand, and I'm certain in the
Yes.
marketing space, tell people tell people that, you're you're still hearing me, but my
Yes, I can still hear you.
sorry. So market, you start on a strategy and sometimes you need to modify it or that strategy is no longer working for whatever reason and we need to pivot. And why not have somebody like you that's going to be there monitoring this stuff, right?
Yep. Yeah, I appreciate that point that our marketing is always evolving, right? Just like I think our businesses are. I think really good business owners are the ones who are always kind of evaluating like what could I be doing better? What could I be doing different? Is has the market shifted? Do I need to change one of my offers or a way that I'm doing something to, fit the changes that I'm seeing in the market? I think the process of business ownership is one that you're always evolving and that holds true for marketing as well. I don't think you can just set a plan and say, okay, this is what I'm doing forever. This is how I'm going to market my
Mhm,
business, right? There's new
mhm,
social platforms, new mediums, right? There's new things popping up all the time. So we always have to be kind of evolving that. So I appreciate that you say the same thing from a brand standpoint, that it is always going to be evolving. You're always going to be
mhm,
learning and refining and tweaking.
mhm. Yeah, I had somebody ask me that question recently and she's like, "Well, my brand is pretty much set." And I was like, "But is it?" Maybe for the moment, maybe for this, like, moment that we're in,
Yeah,
let's see how it works, and then let's go back and refine, and then see how that works, and then go back and refine, and then see how that works.
right, right.
Yeah.
So, Melissa, I'm curious, we're starting to talk about some of these kind of lessons learned from this experience that you had. I'm
Mhm,
curious if you would be willing to dive in because you mentioned values in your values, that are
mhm.
central to your brand and your business.
Yeah.
How did those, and also, I just want to point out that when we were talking about this, right, and you were like, it's an expensive lesson. I think that this was before we
Yeah.
came on air. This is an
Yeah.
expensive lesson to learn, and I don't know if there was
Mhm,
any good that came of it, but it actually sounds like there was, aside from the lessons learned,
mhm.
it gave you this opportunity, it sounds like, to really dig into your own brand and how you want to approach branding for your clients as
Yes.
well.
Yes. 100%. What exactly do you want me to what do you want me to talk about there?
Yeah, sorry. So that was just like another side note that I had, but
Uh-huh.
I think the values aspect could be really interesting to
Yeah.
just elaborate on that as far as like the values that are central to you and your brand and how that played a role maybe at coming out of that negative experience going
Mm.
forward and how you evaluate opportunities and decisions you have to make, keeping those values in mind.
Yeah, yeah. I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest value thing that hit for me and my understanding of what I would tolerate and what I would not was this idea of authenticity. It's very big to me. Like, is it really you? Like, are you really coming across as you? I'm one of those people where, and I've kind of always been this way, and I think that this is in large part why I couldn't stand to be in the corporate space anymore by the time I left, is because I had to put on some different persona than I was. I don't know if you know this. I was a CPA. I still actually have the designation, of course, but
I
a
did not know
CPA.
that.
Yeah. And most people who meet me just go, "That's weird," because not that doesn't make any sense. That's not to say there's not a lot of, like, super fun CPAs and, like, bubbly personalities,
Creative and
etcetera, creative. I know they're out there. I'm speaking to you. Hello. But, but, I had to really sort of tamper that down a lot. And by the time that I came out, there was that classic shedding of the corporate layer thing that had to happen. And
Mhm.
so what I realized through that experience is that I knew inside that this probably wasn't the right way to go. You just have that like intuitive feeling that
Yeah.
this doesn't feel like me.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing is like when I look at evaluating opportunities now and evaluating clients now, the potential clients, there has to be that feeling of like I am speaking to somebody that um I can really pull out what makes them tick because they're going to be
Yeah.
open with me and they're going to be real with me.
Mhm.
And that's so important in my work because if you can't do that, if you're gonna be scared, everybody should be a little bit scared, of course, but, like, if you're gonna be so scared that you're gonna hold back and not
Yeah.
really give your all, then this isn't going to be a strong brand.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I authentic This is probably one of the reasons that you and I get along so well. Authenticity is so core to me and in
Yes.
my business and just me as a person. And so that totally resonates for sure. So we're coming up on time. I am curious if there's any kind of I feel like we've covered some really great lessons learned, right? Like figuring out your brand first and using the values and that framework and that
Mhm,
process to really help inform those marketing decisions that you might be making going forward.
mhm,
And listening out for those. I'm trying to recap some of our lessons here so then you can add on anything else that might be coming to mind.
yeah,
um we talked just briefly about like the promise, right, of like, oh, your business is going to blow up. Like that should be a red flag for any business owner. I mean, when I'm on
yes.
discovery calls with client, potential clients, and they're like, well,
Mhm,
I want so many number of leads in this amount of time, and I always say like, I'm not going to guarantee you that. I That's not the business I'm
mm-mm,
in. I'm not going to guarantee you it. I can tell you these are some of the results that some of my clients have received after working with me and implementing those strategic marketing plans, but I'm not
mhm,
promising anything. So I think that that's another lesson for business owners to think about, is one of those kind of like through the vetting process, like, what are you hearing? And if it sounds too good to be true, we're going to do this in 10 weeks. Like, it probably is
mhm.
too good to be
It's
true.
probably too good to be true. True, and then I think the flip side of that as well, just when you're talking about results, and this applies to I don't care who it is you're working with, but in particular in the marketing and branding space, is that your results are are on you. So we are here to support, we are here to guide, we're here to create that puzzle that fits for
Hmm.
you. And you are a very important part of that team. And it must be that you have to implement, like you have to
Yeah.
really be there and you have to be 100% there and in. You can't
Yep.
hand this off. You can't, think it's a magic pill. No.
Yeah. I love that as a takeaway for sure, because I think a lot of times, we started this conversation explaining that you come from, you're in the marketing space, which gives you a benefit compared to a lot of
Mhm,
business owners who are evaluating marketing opportunities and vendors and service providers. Um, and so I think that a lot of times when business owners don't have that background in marketing, right, it sounds so appealing to just say, I'm going to hire an agency and they're just going to take care of all of this for me.
oh
And I
yeah,
love
of
that you're
course.
bringing up this point that like, it can't and it shouldn't be that way. It should be a
No.
collaborative partnership where they're like an extension of your team, not like, okay, you just go do this whole marketing thing for us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I know for a fact, for you in that space, I mean, the idea is that this is a strategy for you to implement. And, we can take a whole lot off your plate in terms of, and shorten the amount of time even for you to get to goals. Because
Mhm.
when you have the strategy, you get to the goals faster. That's just
Mhm.
natural progression there. But ultimately, yeah, it really is that team aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, because the
Definitely.
marketing and the sales need to go together, and we could we could talk a whole nother episode
We
about that.
could. We could.
To wrap up, because I do want to keep us on time,
Mhm.
are there any other kind of last parting words, lessons learned that we didn't cover that you want to make sure we leave our audience with?
I wanna say one quick thing because I do think this is just from the perspective of this space that you and I are in that we understand. Um, and I sort of mentioned a little bit of this before about brand not being your website. What I want to encourage people to do, even if you have already developed a website, you've already got whatever visuals that you've created, I really encourage you to kind of go back and make sure that you have the foundational pieces there as well. Because there's so many people's websites I see, and I do this thing called brand hacking where I show how a really cohesive website, like what's underneath all of that, all the decisions that were
Mm,
made to get there. So most people actually create their marketing assets, their website, their photos, graphics, all those things without having done that deep work. They come out and they say,
mm,
"Oh, I like that color. Oh, I like that font." But it doesn't convey anything. And so the
mhm.
only way you have that conveyance is understanding of all those things. And so that piece for everyone listening, that's brand strategy, that piece, the underlying stuff. What
Yep.
comes next? Then there's the visual brand, and then there's the marketing. And so I want people to really understand those buckets because most people don't.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's important to
That
know that.
I was just going to say that's incredibly important. And that's a great note, I think, to leave our listeners on. If they want to get in touch with you, Melissa, and dive deeper into this branding space, how can our listeners reach out?
Well, let's see. I have a new thing called my brand power hour. So I'm
Nice.
doing this twice monthly. I wasn't actually prepared to drop the link, but maybe we can do that
Yeah, just
after
send it
the
to me after.
stream.
I'll include it in the comments. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm doing this twice monthly on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. And it's really just an opportunity to come into the room with me. I'll either teach something about brand or you can pick my brain about your brand, that kind of thing. And then I'm also trying to bring in what I'm considering visionary people like me, like you, who want to actually meet each other and create collaborations. And so it's going to be kind of like a half networking, half teach and the networking part is like nothing you've probably ever experienced in any other networking group, so just come prepared.
Love
But I
that.
but I'll
That
give you
sounds
the link and
awesome.
then people can sign up for
Okay.
that.
All right,
Mhm.
perfect. Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate
Yeah,
you coming on to Unfudge Your Marketing. And
thank you.
if you are not connected with Melissa or I, please reach out on LinkedIn, and we look forward to hearing from you.